Hey everyone, it's Michael from Chess Lifestyle, and today I wanted to teach you guys how best to go about learning an opening. Because I was thinking, if I were to get into chess, for the first time right now, I would actually have no idea where to start. There's so many different terms being thrown around, and it just seems really daunting to try and get into as a beginner. So I thought I'd try and come up with a comprehensive list. Well, not a list, but a guide of how you can try and improve your openings and master that stage of the game. So really, when you're starting off, I would say that you need 3 opening systems. And what I mean by that is that you need one opening system that you play as white, you need one opening system that you play as black against the starting move e4, and you need one opening system you play as black against the starting move d4. And by having these 3 openings, it will kind of give you the building blocks you would need to be able to face any other kind of openings. Obviously when you improve, you'll probably need to learn a bit more than just that, but as a starting basis, that's probably the best place to start. So if you're a beginner, what I would advise is for you to, as your white repertoire, to learn the move e4. Now the reason why e4 is so good is because it really gives you an appreciation for a bunch of different opening structures that can arise from the starting move e4, and I think it's just important for your early chess development as a player. So my point is, e4 is probably the most principled opening, and it will really reinforce ideas such as central control, development of pieces, and an idea of what king safety is all about. Now, I should warn you that since e4 is one of the most common openings as white, you will have to come across lots of different black ideas that black can throw at you, and when you improve, you're going to have to start actually learning specific systems against each of the pet systems that black can come up with, and it can take a lot of time to learn everything, but I still think it's a good place to start. So onto black openings. When I was a junior player, I used to actually prefer playing as black than white, because you can actually decide how the game goes, whether you want maybe a more open setup or a more closed setup, maybe a position that offers more crazy tactics, or maybe a more solid defensive setup. I really felt that as black, you could tailor the game to how you want it to go. And of course, you can say the same for white, but at the most basic level, I think that holds true. So really with black, I would say you should choose the opening that the moves and ideas come most naturally to you. Now, as a beginner, it's probably going to be really hard to understand and know what kind of player you are and what kind of positions you like. So I would say just try a bunch of different black openings. Just choose, I don't know, you can even just choose which black opening has the coolest name or something. Just start from there. And if you maybe can't understand which openings you are finding the best moves most easily, maybe you can just go by your results. If, let's say, you're trying out the French defense and you're losing every game, but then you start trying out the Caro-Kann and you start winning every game, then that's some good indication that moves in the Caro-Kann come a bit more naturally to you. So perhaps, okay, the next thing I'm going to say is a bit higher level, but when you choose a black opening, you should also decide what mentality you're going into it with. What I mean by that is, as black, you can either try and choose opening setups that try and reach equality and that you'd be content with getting a draw, or you can try and choose black openings that go for the throat immediately and try and win. Now, at the highest of levels, you'll find that a lot of players, they are very happy to get a draw with black, since objectively, because white moves first, white has that inherent advantage. So you might find with stronger players, they're choosing maybe more tame setups, or setups that give them possibilities of having forced draws, just because they know that with best play, white should be able to get some significant advantage. Now, to be honest, at our level, or beginners, or just chess amateurs in general, I really don't think this whole playing for a draw concept is too relevant, because there are so many mistakes being made in the middle game and end game. Kind of the early stages of the game aren't going to really make the biggest difference at the end of the day. So I think the best advice would be to just play for the win in every game, whether you're white or black, and definitely at this kind of level you can get away with playing in that way. So another piece of advice I read, I wasn't really sure where to put this in the video, but basically there's an international master called Irina Belmaga. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I read an article of hers where she basically said how she got to 2300, which is like FM standard, by playing sidelines alone. Now, what I mean by sidelines is sidelines are opening systems that are less common than the main lines, but objectively slightly worse. But I think lots of people forget that sidelines might just not be as popular in current times, and a lot of them aren't refuted by any means. And the real advantage of learning a sideline is that you can really understand the positions of that sideline very well. And sometimes if you're facing an opponent who's the same rating as you, if they don't know that setup and position of that sideline that is your pet system and you know really well, they're going to be at a disadvantage, and they're not going to be able to play as strong as their level suggests. So I honestly think it's some really great advice, and learning a sound sideline well can really gain you some really good results. And chances are, if your opponent does know the exact line to refute your sideline, then they're probably just a massive book theory nerd, and they're probably like not too good at other aspects of chess because they've spent so long researching into these random sidelines. So you can probably just bank on outplaying them in the middle game and end game. Like, of course, all of this applies up to the level of, I don't know, 2500, but for most of us, that's good enough. So I thought now I'd give you some examples of openings you can try in your own game, as well as discussing some of the openings I play in my own repertoire. So firstly, I would advise, as I've said already, start by playing 1e4, which is the king's pawn. But I would say probably avoid the most common lines, and the most common lines are the Roy Lopez against e4, e5, or the open Sicilian against c5, which is the Sicilian. Just because your opponents will be ready for those lines in particular, and it will probably be quite demoralizing to have to face so many different pet systems that black has prepared. And it will just be too overwhelming at first. So I would suggest starting out with some sidelines from e4. I would recommend learning the Vienna against e5, or perhaps the Grand Prix attack against c5, just to give you some clear, objectively good ideas in the opening stages of the game to help you get underway for a solid game of chess. As black, I'd probably recommend learning the French defense, because I think the ideas are really clear, and if your opponent is unaware of them, they can really get into a real pickle at the start and even have a much worse opening even as white. Come to think of it, when I was in secondary school, I started a chess club, and I remember I was just like giving some lessons about like random stuff, some opening stuff, some middle game stuff, and I quickly realized that like after I gave a lesson on the French defense, the whole club started playing the French defense, and actually we played in some like school tournaments, and the French was like scoring really well. Like everyone was able to like pick up on the ideas really easily, and yeah, I just think as a starting opening to try and like get a feel for like what learning an opening is all about, the French is a really good place to start. So onto my opening repertoire. My openings aren't main lines either, they're still sidelines, but I feel like they create positions that I really enjoy playing, and I feel like I understand the ideas in the openings really well, so I think it suits me a lot. So as white, I play knight f3, which is called Reti, and I actually started playing the Reti because I was sick and tired of playing e4 and just having black have so many different setups they can prepare that they know the positional aspects of really well and just throw me off guard. So the reason why I chose knight f3 was because when I was a black player, well, when I was playing as black myself, I used to hate coming across knight f3. Like, I wouldn't be able to do my pet systems and I would always get into worse positions. So I thought, you know, why don't I try this opening myself? And on a whim, I did some research and I bought this DVD series by Alejandro Ramirez called Reti, a flexible attacking opening. And this opening DVD series was amazing. Like, it just was super clear about the different setups and the different ideas within the Reti, and I just thought it created really, really playable positions that would get a really easy advantage against people who don't really know what they're doing, which for the majority of people that only have time to really look into openings against e4 and d4, they sometimes forget about how to face the Reti. So I thought that was a really good practical decision. And the other good thing about the Reti is that it's not a bad opening. Like, the strongest players play it. It's probably the third most common opening after e4 and d4. Okay, maybe the English is also up there. But yeah, it's a sound opening. It catches your opponents off guard, and the ideas behind the setups really lend itself towards a really comfortable game if you know the ideas and principles within the opening. Now, against e4, I used to be a French player, but I've started playing the Sicilian just because I think it suits my style of play more. It's a bit more dynamic, and I was finding with the French, it worked really well up until maybe 2100 kind of level, but as soon as you get above that and players really start to know their openings, they can get some really strong attacking lines where if you're lazy as black and you haven't done your opening research, you can really, really get crushed. So I wasn't having too much fun with that, so I tried changing to the Sicilian and I started getting a lot better results. And the opening I play with in the Sicilian against the main line open Sicilian as white is the Kalashnikov variation. And the Kalashnikov is kind of like a Sveshnikov, which is more commonly seen at the top level. It's Magnus's first choice of opening. But the Kalashnikov, it's maybe like an accelerated Sveshnikov, and I think it creates really dynamic positions that are both tactical but also have a lot of position nuances. And if the opponent isn't prepared against a Kalashnikov, the Kalashnikov player can get really, really strong positions. And I really do like playing openings that give you the opportunity to fight for an advantage from the get-go. Now, my opening against d4 is very similar to the Kalashnikov in that regard, and it's the modern Benoni. So the modern Benoni is one of the most dynamic tries you can play against d4, and I think it's a really great try because often players that play d4 move 1 are often looking for a more quiet positional game than players that choose 1 e4. So if you can force them into a really tactical dynamic mess on the board, normally they're not really prepared for it. So I think from a psychological point of view, it's a really great opening. And I remember as a junior, I had such a great track record with it. It was my favorite opening, and I was constantly beating players of, I don't know, a few hundred like rating above me just because I knew the principles really, really well. Like, I think it's another opening where it's got lots of tactics, but it also has lots of positional nuances, and the side that has the greater positional knowledge will really come out on top. So that's my opening repertoire. So once you've decided on your openings, you then need to know how actually do you learn the opening. So as I've already mentioned, you can either go down the route of buying a DVD series by a top GM explaining the ideas behind the opening, so like the Alejandro Ramirez DVD about the Reti. I would say books have a very similar concept behind them where the author is trying to explain their ideas about the moves, and I would just say that maybe DVDs are easier to digest, but probably have less depth than some of the best books out there. I would also want to say that before you buy a book or a DVD series, make sure to do lots of research on the author, because even if it's an opening you like, if the author isn't good at explaining the thoughts behind the opening, it would really just be a waste of money. And I would also say try and avoid authors that just have written millions of books, because it's probably quantity over quality for them, and they're just doing it to like make some money, but you know, the core ideas and principles won't really come across in those books. I would also like to give a shout out to a website which I used a lot in my junior days called 365 Chess, and essentially it's a free opening database online. All you need to do is make an account, and it shows you which openings are most common. It shows you in each variation the percentage of white wins, black wins and draws in a position, and I think it's really useful to get a feel for what the top grandmasters are playing, so you can try and mimic them and get a similar strong opening. Now, you do have to be careful with this, because if you just copy them completely and you don't understand the ideas behind the moves, you'll maybe follow the exact same moves as the grandmaster, but you'll get to that position and be completely lost and not know how to continue the middle game or even the end game from that point. So I definitely think this is a good asset to use alongside having like a core manual, whether that be a really good DVD series or a really good book on that opening. So yeah, wow, that was a lot more information than I initially expected, but I hope some of that is useful, and I hope you can now study openings and try and gain advantage on your opponent from the get-go. Okay, see you next time.